Hi, and welcome to the Jess and Scott and You show tonight. I have to tell you what, every single week turns out to be my absolute positively most favorite show so far to date, and I really am sure this one is not going to be any different. When we started this series of storytelling, we started with the art of the story with Les Dossie. We then had Jason Fresca on, and he talked about we talked about the importance of what our business can tell us. So we were talking about a daytimer. Oh man, I can't.
Versus Evernote.
Yeah, well, I know it's daytimer versus Evernote, but I was trying to think of the exact title. So it's
Well, it's a
are you
daytimer
running a
world and an
daytimer
Evernote
business?
world.
Yeah, exactly, and an Evernote world exactly. And this week we're going to be talking about differentiation in storytelling. What are we telling our clients and our audience and our potential clients, and how is that being received by them? And then there are so many other shows that have occurred that really support this. So if you haven't, go check out hoashows.com and check out, Phil's Break the Rules show and the Women in Business Today. They talked about sales funnels, and then even on Ray and his Lunch Bunch today, we were talking about trust. All of those things tie in. So it's really awesome that all of this stuff happened at the same time to bring us all together. And one of the things that really excites me about differentiation and about storytelling and how they come together is not only do we have to know our customer, but we have to use words that resonate with them. And so if you were to break people down, there are four basic types. I would call one a nurturer, where they're interested in building relationships. I would call one action-oriented, where they're interested in results. And I would call one process-oriented, where they just want to know the plan and the path and what's going to happen. And then there's the knowledge-based group, where they're like, if you don't have facts and figures and can prove that it already worked 500,000 times, I might not really be interested in what you have to say. So not only do we have to think about our differentiation in our story, we have to think about that in relationship to the people that make up our target audiences that we're trying to reach. So we'll be back in a minute right after our open.
Okay, you're handing it to me, and I'm ready this time. Let's see if it works.
We'll just bring you right in. Mike Scott, good evening. What a show starter. This was really good. We spent a good amount of time in the green room kind of warming up, didn't we?
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun.
Well, we always start this part off by talking about why we chose this topic, and just talked a little bit about the first two sessions. So we chose this topic because it's a trilogy, and we needed to wrap up to close the circle. And essentially what's happened is that the technology, and especially Google Plus, have allowed us to step out on a stage, wouldn't you say? And we now have an opportunity to address an audience, whereas before that was really reserved for the very few who could afford it through radio and television and newspaper advertising. So it's a little bit of like a casting call. And there's that audience out there, and we get to tell our story. But what the hell is that all about?
Oh, but I'm going to read from Mike's profile a minute, right?
Yes.
Here's what Social Media Hack does. Identify goals, needs, and assets. Then talk about the business. Target clients and influencers and the specific goals. All those tie together to support all of the marketing and the lead generation that a business is looking for. So no wonder we wanted you here tonight, Mike.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Scott, that you're talking about Google Plus specifically, because people like Michael Hyatt have been talking about blogging, and they've been talking about social media for years now as a platform for growing your business and getting your message out there. But it really, I don't think it was until Google Plus that people started to use social media to tell stories as much as they are today. It's really exploding because of the nature of the platform. With Google Plus, you can say as much as you want, and you can include all kinds of links, and you can include pictures. Anybody who's ever seen David Amerland's Sunday morning paper on Google Plus, it's amazing, and he's weaving 5, 6, 10 different stories together into one bigger story. It's pretty incredible what people are doing on Google Plus.
Boy, if anyone hasn't seen his Sunday read, they really should. I liken it to when I was growing up. There was the New Yorker. It's that magazine, and people could write into the editor, and it would take 2 weeks for the paper, the snail mail to reach them. With the Sunday read, people comment, and then they comment on the comments, and there is such a rich, deep conversation that flows from what David has. I'm delighted that you brought that up, because it's just a new phenomenon. It's something new because of the interaction, the storytelling that is facilitated by having immediate feedback.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, not to lighten the mood or anything, but we got, check this out. Jeff says, I'm looking forward to story time with Mike. And Johnny says, the story of the frog and the scorpion, after all. The frog allowed the scorpion to sting them on their back. Okay, now I'm ready for the show to start.
And that's a great story. Do you guys know that story?
We do. Tell it, though, for us. Let's set the stage.
Well, yeah, it's a fable. It's probably an Aesop's fable, or variation of it, and you had a river that was overflowing. I think I'm not really telling it very well. I'm just telling the gist of what the fable was. But you've got a frog or a fox, sometimes it's told, and a scorpion that need to cross the river. And the scorpion can't swim, and he wants the fox or the frog to carry him on his back. And the frog says, no, you're going to sting me, and then we're going to drown. And the scorpion says, no, I won't sting you. Then we both fall in the river. So the frog allows the scorpion to crawl on his back and starts to swim across the river, and halfway across, the scorpion stings him. And as the frog is sinking into the river and they're both about to drown, he says, why did you do that? We're both going to die. And the scorpion says, I'm a scorpion. It's what I do. So
let's relate that back to, I might be taking the words right out of your mouth, Scott, and if I'm not,
no, go for it, please.
Okay, so let's apply that to storytelling in the mediums that we have today, in this new way to approach transparency and connecting with others.
Yeah, so one of the things that I teach clients all the time is to use blog content and use stories to talk about their business and to teach. And a story like that, it's a teaching tool, and it's something that businesses can use in certain situations to convey a message of some kind. What the message is in that particular story, it's pretty dark. I don't know.
I've got an idea of how it relates. Could be totally off the wall, but when you were telling that story, I'm like, okay, how does this relate to what we're talking about? And I'm like, oh, right. What's the first thing that businesses do when they get here? The same thing they did in print advertising, the same thing that they did in direct mail advertising, the same thing they did in other offline or even online advertising or connecting venues that don't really work the same in social media. And I think we're still trying to figure that out a little bit. Hopefully we all don't sink to the bottom together, but that would be what I took away from the story and how it relates maybe to our conversation.
The story of what not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
But
which is actually, Scott, I'm sorry, I actually have a little sticky note here and it says, choose what not to do. Sometimes it's easier than choosing what to do.
Yeah. I love your sticky notes, and even your sticky notes tell a story, because what's the shape of, it's no accident that it's a star, right?
No, I walked through the store and I liked it. because it makes me feel happy when I look at it. And, you know, if you're going to have this plethora of a mess as you're transitioning away from sticky notes to Evernote, why not have something pretty to look at?
Yeah. So people nowadays, I've been told and believe, and I'd like you to comment on this, Mike. They don't want a company to be just a company. They now want to be able to have a little bit of empathy. They want to know a little bit more about the company and relate to it. And so then all of a sudden, the companies whose culture is not normally that way, because it's now a new world, at least for some, they want to be part of the conversation, because you and I are, you know, the civilians are talking about it all the time, so the companies want to be part of that conversation. How do you approach your clients who have to have a paradigm shift in their way that they view their relationship with their customers? How do you bring them over to the let's see, the bright side?
Yeah, we typically have brainstorming sessions, and I may not say we're going to come up with stories to tell, but essentially that's what it's going to be. You know, some of their content is going to be factual information, how-to guides, and so on, but a big part of it has got to be coming up with this culture of content marketing, and that includes finding ways to tell stories that, you know, clients and potential clients can relate to. Some of that's going to be telling stories about other clients, sharing case studies and testimonials and stories, and you know, in fact, I've got a client who's in the financial industry. They can't talk about specific people, and they really can't even talk about themselves that much. But they can share stories about families and say, you know, okay, we're going to talk about Joe and Mary. And Joe and Mary are not their real names, but this is a situation that Joe and Mary went through. And they tell a story. And it's a very simple
that's really
story.
good. That's a really good point, because I'm sorry, you say banking, I've got something to learn from the banks, but I really don't necessarily want to hear about finance or how I should save or why I should save. I already know all that, and what you're telling me is we're going to learn the same thing through a different venue, through a more of a creative approach.
Right, right. Because not everybody, I mean, you said you had 4 different styles of potential clients. They're all looking for different things, which means as a business, we have to have different kinds of content on our website to address each of these different segments. And even within these segments, you've got people who are at different points within the sales funnel, within the buying cycle. You've got people who really thrive on information, but maybe they don't realize they have a problem, or maybe they know they have a problem but they're not sure the right solution, or maybe they've identified the solution and now they're just comparing you to your competition. Their thought process is the same. They're looking for the same style of information to be delivered to them, but the actual information that needs to be given to them is different. So you need to have that combination of approach and different kinds of content. So sharing different stories that are totally different things. You know, it's just having a mindset where when you're writing, who are you writing for? What are you writing about? What emotional triggers are you trying to get to for that specific audience at that specific time?
And that ties right into this from Trina. What are the compelling stories of our era? Are they true? What role has media played in their acceptance? And where is the hope in all of this? None.
Wow, that's deep.
I know, right?
And and there are certainly a lot of stories, and we could take this way beyond business. I'm actually an historian by education, so I could talk at length about the stories in our culture that are or are not true, that are perceived to be true, but maybe they aren't, and the lessons that we're taking from them or shouldn't. But from a business perspective, I would say with the content that we're creating, it's definitely a good idea to stay away from any kind of story or information that we don't know inherently to be 100% accurate and true. So as a business, that typically means focusing on the stories that we can tell ourselves, stories about ourselves, about our clients, or relating very factual, very true stories like that fable. There's no question to the veracity of that fable because it was made up. It's a fable, but we can relate it to our business in some way as a lesson to be learned.
Well, it never occurred to me that that the truthfulness of a story is part of the equation. It's almost there's this. I'm wondering if this would be fertile ground to dive deep into, because there is a point to a story, and so is it that you start at the end and this is the point that we want to make now? How can we take our audience to that ending point, or do you start with the story and let the story lead you to the natural conclusion? And how much of that is manipulation, and how much of it can be anything except manipulation, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, and part of it depends on whether or not you, as the writer, are a natural storyteller, and how well you're able to craft and fit that small story, the factual story, into the bigger picture. Some people are really good at that, and they can really meld and merge the little story, the little nugget that they're sharing, into the larger message of their content. And some people, that's not a skill that they possess. So if that's not in your toolbox, if that's not something you're really strong at, then you're just going to want to kind of convey the facts. This is the lesson. This is the story. We had a client who went through this, and they benefited, or it was a challenge, and we overcame it. And you'll still get the message across, the point across, and you won't struggle as much though by doing it that way. Whereas if you're good at it, you can start off by sharing the tale and slowly slide into, this is why it's important. This is the message to take from this story, and let the reader kind of come to some of their own conclusions.
Yeah, I think that's called the primrose path, but that's
if it's manipulative, sure.
Well, and yeah, that was perhaps a little bit cynical. So what I hear you saying, though, is that from a business, whether or not you're your own business or whether or not you're someone who's helping some other business, you lead with your strengths. You play the hand that you're dealt with. And Jess, I hope I'm not taking us too far off track here, but within the businesses that you're familiar with, is it your job to try and encourage them to bring out the best of the employees and to find champions within the organization who might be able to tell stories well enough? Or is that just you're getting too far into the interior of the fabric and the culture of the company, and that's not what you're being paid for. You're being paid for making sure that the tweets are out there and the blogs are written and whatnot. What's that relationship? Well, what lessons can you share?
Yeah, and every client's a little bit different, but I would say in my ideal situation, I would absolutely want to have that kind of close relationship, because I talk about it all the time, this culture of content marketing. That's my ideal situation where I can come into a company and help them build up this culture from the ground up, because every single employee, every single one, can be helping to create this culture, helping to create content that can help a company. And I have a story to tell you. There was a company in the Atlantic Northeast that was failing. They were absolutely failing. They were going to go bankrupt within 6 months. And I'm not making this up. This is a case study that was published probably 2 years ago. Maybe I think it's by HubSpot actually, and this company was failing, and they went to a retreat and they had some consultants come in and help them understand what their options were, and they totally abandoned traditional marketing. They totally abandoned the gobs of money they were spending on radio and television advertising, and they embraced content marketing, and they embraced it as a culture for the entire company, which means every single person under the staff got involved in some way. Now, a big part of that was identifying what their strengths were. Not everybody was a writer. Not everybody could be involved in social media, but everybody could help in some way. If you had an employee who was going on site to a client's location, and I personally use the analogy of a caterer. If you've got people who are going on site before a wedding and setting up tables and putting down linens and that sort of thing, those are those people can be taking pictures and photographing some of the pre-event decorations and that kind of stuff that are going on, some of the post-event stuff.
Everybody has a phone these days. Right?
Everyone's got a phone.
Everybody's got a phone. Everybody can. That's so cool.
Everything's so visual with blogs and content. They can all be helping.
Yeah.
And then they have skin in the game. We have one of the wonderful wonders of the event page is that people can comment, and because they comment, and then we can comment on that. And Jess, you're so perfect at being able to extract. I get sidetracked, and then you ask me a question, and I what was that? I was paying it. So I don't. There's a talent to being able to interact that way. Well, the employees do it the same way. If they take a picture of an event that they really like, and it's used, and people get excited about it, they're closer to their company, and they're closer to their constituents as well, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And so you build in processes and you build in rewards and incentives. And it doesn't even have to be cash, but you make sure that everybody has a way to be involved, whether it's helping to create the blog, managing the social media, or helping to generate ideas and stimulate participation. And, you recognize the people that are doing a good job, and you reach out and you help the employees that obviously are struggling with whatever it is. You make sure everybody has things that they can do. You identify their strengths, and you come up with a plan that really works for your company. And it worked for this company. Within months, they turned their business around.
Let's see. So I think here's what it is. Jeff says, I think Mike is talking about Marcus Sheridan's River Pool and Spas.
Yeah, and I'm not sure because I read that so long ago, and I wish I would have bookmarked it because I don't know now. I don't even remember what the name of the company was. I don't know if it was even said in the article that I had read. But I'll look that up, Jeff. Thank you. Because I'd love to be able to tell people more than just a company.
And one of the things I'm hearing you say is that every single person in that organization has a purpose. They matter to the company. They matter to the story. And once they feel like they matter, then they're like, oh yeah, now I have something to share too. I'm really excited about this, and they turn into these wonderful superheroes. And I'm going to use that because I know you're a superhero guy, and we are in our house too, right? So if everybody's a superhero and they have their superpower, whatever their strength is, then being able to band together and have that is an incredibly powerful tool, and I actually think that's something that a lot of businesses miss out on. And it's the culture that goes around social media and content marketing really is about integrating all of the different elements of people and their roles throughout a company.
The art of storytelling has been around since way before even print. Cavemen were telling stories. That's how they learned and communicated. So it's ingrained in our humanity, in our culture, in our history. And again, like I said, I think before in the green room, I was a historian. That's actually my collegiate degree was in history, which is all about telling stories. It's not just about relaying, facts and figures and dates and numbers. It's about understanding what happened in our past, and why did that happen, and how is that relevant to me? And that's where we kind of need to bring it down, for a business, is when we're telling a story, whether it's in a blog or social media, we're announcing it and we're spreading it, and we're trying to reach as many people as we are. But at the same time, we need to remember that our words should be conveyed in a way that it's touching the individual, as though we're speaking to somebody on a one-to-one basis, and that's what's going to differentiate us, from some of the other people that are out there speaking and shouting. Is making sure that when we're writing as though we're talking to an individual, or we're speaking through the camera to an individual.
Yeah. And there are multiple, going back to the intro where I mentioned that there are 4 types. So by default, I lead by relationship. And I like action, but I'm not necessarily good at calling for action. And I definitely don't like processes, and I definitely really don't like stats and figures and numbers. And so when I am writing for a person, it's hard for me to incorporate not only what the story is, but make sure that I'm hitting all 4 of those areas, because I want to connect with each of those personality types within my target audience.
Yeah, that's a challenge, and I don't even know that. I know I don't think about that cognitively, but I probably don't do a very good job of that in most of my writing. Because I think with my own writing, I'm probably focused on just 1 or 2 of those segments with each different one. And
Which
I might
is
bounce
cool
around.
because, and that actually I think is part of the story and the differentiation, not only price, place, product, and what is the value proposition, but who are going to be the most likely people to benefit from the experience. Because if it's really service-based, somebody who really cares about numbers and statistics isn't going to be as interested. And so maybe all 4 aren't needed in a piece of content.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Rain actually, she had a question. She was like, Mike, can you provide some examples of stories you've done for clients that both they and their customers related to?
Stories that I've done? Well, I should say that as a professional, most of what I do is consulting and teaching. And so by that I mean I don't do a lot of blog writing on behalf of other clients. I prefer that my clients, whenever possible, they write their own content, because I want them to speak with their own voice, which is something that Dr. Covey taught me in his books, and I've kind of taken that to heart. So there are clients where I manage their social media communities and that sort of thing. So technically, I'm kind of speaking for them when I'm posting the social media for them. But I try to be as hands-off with that kind of stuff as possible. I want to teach my clients to do things themselves.
Well, let's just take this a little bit further, because there is an exchange of comments with David Amerlin, who is the semantic search guy, and it was that one of his responses was that, and sure, semantic search remembers everything, and it remembers everything forever, and it remembers every nuance. So all of a sudden, we have this mediator, which is everything that's involved with semantic search, just increasingly understanding the stories. So how does that, I mean, I don't even know if anyone has even started to wrap their heads around that. The story that you tell today is going to come around and bite you 3 months from now, or 3 years from now, or 31 years from now, if you're not careful, or it might be doing the exact opposite. What?
Yeah, I don't know.
Jesse, you're not doing your job.
Nope.
you're just letting Mike hang out there, aren't you?
Oh, well, that's why I had to giggle a little bit. I'm like, wow, how do we?
No, I mean, but Scott's point is right. It is a
Yes.
challenge for businesses when you're and let's just stick with blog content for the minute, because that's what I do is write. I don't do video really, except for these hangouts. When you're writing, you're in the present, so that's where your thought process is, and you probably should try to think about where someone's going to be at no matter when they might be reading it. Some things are going to be outside your control. You can be writing from your perspective today, and the economy can be totally different 12 months from now, and people are going to be reading what you said and think it's just rubbish because of the context now. But if you're talking about something that's controversial, something along those lines, that's where you can really get yourself into a lot of trouble. So that's an area where I typically advise my clients to stay away most of the time, and stick with things that aren't at all controversial, so they don't come back and bite you down the road. Something that maybe, and it's hard to speak in such vague generalities, but you could be talking about a topic that's only somewhat controversial today, and a year from now this topic has exploded and
Well, yeah.
polarizing.
There's a great case in point right now. The Ukrainian uprising. Jess and I did a couple of programs about that, and I'm looking back on it. I'm seeing where we were pitch perfect and on tone, and I'm looking back and I'm seeing where I was either a little naive or clumsy, or boy, if I had to do it over again, there are a couple of things I might have done a little bit differently. Because we didn't have you whispering in our ear, maybe.
Well, and the other thing I would say to that, I'm going to be a little bit of a Groucho here, and I'm like,
Okay.
I don't care. If my body has all new cells from head to toe every 7 years, who cares what I say on social media today if I say it from my heart with integrity and I have done my research and actually have spent some time thinking about the subject or gathering from a lot of different sources? Because, from that perspective, I think it's cool. You're a historian, and we see that history repeats itself. Well, if we get worried about what we're going to say in the future, aren't we in that same bubble? Aren't we out to make a bigger, better world? Now I'll try and get ungrouchy, but I'm kind of getting riled up here.
Yeah, with everything, there are lines.
Yeah.
That you can cross and not cross.
That's true.
And I think that's where I'm coming from, is from a business perspective. We're here to do business. We're here to find customers, make customers happy, make sales, make a profit. So when we start to talk about topics that are of questionable business value, and
you make a point. That's very good, yes.
To be somewhat controversial, that's the kind of thing where I'm usually like, do we need to go there? Religion and politics, typically speaking, are things that hands off. If you want to talk about them as an individual, more power to you. But as a business, what's the point? It's too polarizing.
And there's an area in there without being on those extremes that you can still find that differentiation. And this is a good segue right into our +2 takeaway. Okay.
So here it is, and it is the +2 takeaway, and this is the third of 4 that we have on it. And what we've been doing is The One Thing, which is a book that has a subtitle of The Surprising Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results. And it is The One Thing by Gary Keller. And at the beginning of the book, he has, if you chase 2 rabbits, you won't catch either one. So that's a story entirely of itself. It's a 2-sentence story, and it tells everything. And Jess, I'm going to hand it over to you in just a moment. And we didn't practice it. If you're going to expound a long time on something, if you could unblue box yourself. I know I was if you think of it, that would be nice. But aside from that, we're going to go on in and talk about, the various truths. So you go ahead and take it away, please.
Okay, sure. You can go ahead and go to the first one. One of the things in this is the second part of the second portion, I guess the second section of the book, a series of chapters. And one of the first things that it talks about is it talks about our place in life and where are we at before we begin our journey of going through the next chapters that he's outlining. And one of the things that he says, and I hate to ruin it for you, but this is so pertinent, he says, let go and unclench your jaw and your butt, okay? So, right there, this can be a really, really hard topic, just what we're talking about tonight, but think about your other business decisions, and you're making big decisions about where you want to take your family, your life, what do you want to have your legacy be in this world. Those are pretty big decisions, and it's kind of, and so when what we're talking about tonight, if it brings up any of those things, just remember, take a deep breath, let go a little, and hopefully we can jump right in. And the first part that I wanted to cover is we really have to think about our critical thinking skills. What is the question? What is the question that's going to help propel us forward? What is it that we can do to be able to identify the resources that we need to basically clear the way and allow our brain the space it needs to let the critical thinking we're doing blossom into some really good ideas that we can use. All right, Scott. And it starts with one question, and Gary Keller has identified this question. What is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? And when we're thinking about that question, there are so many things that can apply to every part of our life. I mean, some of the lives we talked about in the last couple of +2 takeaways, like balance. So if I can't have equal balance of life and family, maybe what needs to happen is that, what is that question? What is the one thing I can do so that everything will be easier or other things will be unnecessary for each area, my personal life, my business life, my contacts. Your intention, can, not should, would, could, can. So, or will might be another word that you could use to think about. You're creating an intention, and by doing that, you're giving yourself a foundational base that you can hold yourself accountable to. The second piece, such by doing it. This is, something's going to happen. I'm going to not only have this foundation to work from, but I've got a place to go. Up, sideways, forward, backward, around. It doesn't matter what that path looks like. We may not know yet. But the idea of asking this question is that there is a path to be taken. And by asking this question, can we find the starting point on that path so we can take our first step? And then our second step with the least amount of course correction over time as possible. The third part, everything else will be easier or unnecessary. So if we're starting with that in mind, if we think back to the very beginning of the book with the domino experience, with the dominoes, where a single domino can knock over, it has the power as it's falling over to knock down a domino twice its size, and then twice its size, and so there's a compounding effect. And I think a similar one is, you start with a little stone and it might start rolling down a hill, and then you have a snowball, and then you have a ginormous snowball, and then you have an avalanche. I think this is a little bit more controlled, though, when we think about dominoes, and I like this domino stuff that Gary Keller uses because it's very specific. It's not like I'm going to get everything along in the way. It's each action that I take has a result that is going to launch me to that next place. And that's one of the reasons I really, really like this question. It's actually a really simple question. If you think about it, the simplicity of this question makes it one of the hardest questions. But if we're asking it over and over, and we've got a really big focus, we've got a really big picture, and we're starting with such a small focus, it makes that path a little bit easier. All right, stop. And yes, I do write out all of my notes so that I do have these handy. Because the secret to success is having the right questions asked. And if we're not using our critical thinking and we're not giving ourselves the space to learn and incorporate other information to make decisions that will allow us to find that answer to that one thing to propel us action to action, then we're really not propelling ourselves towards success. So if you're thinking about something that's a very broad goal or a very specific goal or a very big goal or a very small goal, then you know, something to think about is that where those intersect in the topmost quadrant, that is going to be where you push and you stretch and it's measurable and you're going to go, oh, okay, this is beyond my skill set. This is beyond what I can do. I'm going to have to work really hard to make this happen. But I've got a very specific path in mind, and so things are going to lay themselves out because I'm doing the critical thinking, because I'm taking the actions, and other questions will come along as I'm going along so that I can find the people that I need and the resources that I need to get me where I'm going in the time frame that I have set. So even within that big question, what is the one thing I can do such by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? That in of itself, that's everything you need for a smart oriented goal. We're just turning it into the form of a question so we can think about it beyond a goal of our life or our family or our business, but we can have it be our overarching theme. And I will speak for myself in this, where the more that I practice this, the clearer my path becomes, and I can actually look at something and find out, okay, is it part of my one thing? Does it support the path that I'm on personally? And if it matches those two goals, then does it support whatever variance of life, family, work, friends, volunteer, church, all that good stuff, how all of that fits in together, and how we set our priorities and work from a priority list instead of a to-do list. So when we're thinking about the possibility, piece, you know, you've got something that's doable. You've got something that you can stretch. It might be uncomfortable because it's at the end of the skill set that we have, but then there's that breakthrough. Oh, I know where I need to go. I know how I'm going to change the world, and I'm going to do it different, and I've got this way, and now this path is clear, so what do? You go do it, reach it, and dive right into that one, Scott. Totally dive right into that. You've got to think about the possibilities, because other people are having the same thoughts that we are. So if we're thinking really big and we are reaching out through those possibilities and we can find the thoughts that other people are having, other paths will appear. So we can take those trends and we can use them to complete our picture and start a new possibility and be there and give information and insight and ideas to something that other people can learn from to break out of their comfort zone and achieve their possibilities. Be brilliant, and show that sparkle. And that's really what the whole second part of the book is about. And I have to tell you, every time this is the third time I've read it in a couple of years, and every time I read it, I take away something new, or I go, oh yeah, I really got that the first time. How cool is that? So Scott and Mike, there are a couple of things that I see that tie back into our conversation. So coming out of that, the +2 takeaway, what would you add, and how could we tie it back to our discussion of differentiation and storytelling and content marketing and culture?
Well, I really liked Keller's analogy of the dominoes and the domino theory. I haven't used dominoes specifically as an analogy, but I often teach clients that content marketing and blogging is not I'm going to write one blog and it's going to magically create this giant flow of clients and sales to my website. It's one blog at a time, but each blog that you write, if you do it well, it builds on the last blog, and so the amount of content that you have gets larger and larger, and it's very similar conceptually to having a small domino hit a larger domino and knock that over, and a larger domino knocks that over. HubSpot did a study a couple of years ago. I love their blog. They come up with they're the company that's doing a lot of the statistics and the analysis to appeal to that particular crowd. And their analysis was looking at they looked at 2,000 different companies that were blogging and doing content marketing, and they looked at how much content each one of these websites had, how much traffic the site got, and how many leads were generated as a result of the blog content. And they were able to actually graph it out. As you blogged more, you would get more site traffic and more leads. And it was interesting because when you hit about 50 pieces of content within your website, instead of just a nice steady growth up, it went like this. You started to see exponential growth in traffic and leads and sales
because of
that. Having at that point, all the blogs are building off of each other, and creating this exponential amount of growth.
Go Cardinals, home run! Yes.
Bingo! Ding! 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 Ding!
I love how this aligned. I think that is so fabulous, and that consistency over time, and having that presence of mind to decide what you're going to write about and talk to the audience. It's almost like the light bulb goes on for everybody at the same time, to some degree, and that light bulb is not just like, oh, aha, it's all right, I'm kind of ready to take that next step. I'm going to open myself up and be a little more vulnerable. Whatever is needed within the culture of the person, that's the person's life, that they're from them reading the content.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely.
We talk about paying dues or the tipping point or things like that. Maybe that's a little bit of what you're describing too, is that if it's relationship building, the very first time you and I meet, unless it's love at first sight.
Scott? Hey, Scott? It'll
only be after a while there'll be something that clicks, and I guess it takes 50 blog posts or 50 pieces for it to click in well enough to launch.
Yeah, and it was odd because you can't. They're just numbers. So any conclusions that we reach from that are speculative, and HubSpot was the same way in their report. But I think you're right. I think it is a tipping point. Maybe it's akin to the 10,000 hour rule, where it said that you're not truly an expert in anything until you've done it for 10,000 hours.
Go Malcolm Gladwell. That's right. He's one. That's something that I live by. Yep.
So I'm not an expert in anything then.
Well, me neither. That's not true. I am an expert in some things, but they're probably not the things anybody will care about.
Okay, so if we have to wrap this up, what it is that we're all on this rocket. It's rocket science, and we're going up, and at a certain point, we will reach a velocity that we'll be able to go into orbit. And then once we're into orbit, it's an entirely different game. And the fuel to get us from where we are on Earth into orbit is storytelling. That's at least part of the fuel. How about that for wrapping it up?
That is a good wrap-up. Now I'm going to bring in some comments, and then we'll do our closing comments here. So first we have, let's see, Johnny, I really hope I'm saying your name correctly. The same thing is true in music. Musician writes a song regarding a specific topic or event or feeling, and the audience relates to it in a way totally different from the original intention. A good story will have an impression on people, even if the perception of the audience doesn't exactly align with the original. And then here we go. We've got a couple of other ones. The key to success is having the right questions. Ta-da! It's definitely a good starting point. And then here is another one that directly relates to the +2. Kristen says, can holds one to accountability as to what is possible. Will holds one to the accountability of generosity. I like that comparison, bringing in the will and the bigger and the greater good. So in order to do something because you will implies a certain sense of giving, and you need both. Yay to all of those things. I love that. I don't want this conversation to end. So I'm really sad that we're at the end, because there's so many other places I want to take this conversation. So thank you, Mike, for joining us. And I have to tell you, I have learned a lot tonight, and it's really fun to have a conversation where I feel like I have something to contribute to the conversation, and I take away a learning experience. So thank you for providing that, at least for me tonight, and I'm hoping that our audience feels the same way about that.
My pleasure, and thank you guys for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, glad it's been fun, and it's just so there's just so much pleasure of having such professionalism grace our film strip, to be able to bring it home and to bring value to our audience. So thank you, Mike. We really were thrilled when we realized that you would be on.
Yes. Okay, Scott, as you're queuing up the close, I have one more because it's just too cool. I love what Kristen says. There's a post-it note feature in Evernote. So I'm going to have to go check that out.
Okay.
Oh, wait, but before you do that, I have one other thing. Anybody who is reading The One Thing or wants to start reading The One Thing, we are going to have a panel discussion on this on April 8th, Tuesday, April 8th, same time, same place as always. So if you are reading the book and you are part of our regular audience and you would like to be on the panel, because the criteria have read The One Thing or be reading The One Thing as we're going along, that's not page 2 or 10, that's at least through the lies, then we want to hear from you. Reach out to Scott or myself or the Jess and Scott and You page, and we would love to organize to have you be on our panel. All right, thanks for that. Love all of the conversation tonight, and we will see you again next week.
See you then. Bye-bye. And let's see if this works.